And welcome to the Good Old Days, our program focusing on the history of Raynham. I'm Pat Riley. Our host is retired Selectman Don McKinnon. And as we always say, Don, this is the program where we talk about the history of Raynham and also today's current events, because that will be tomorrow's history.
We solve problems.
We try. We try. We have a special guest today, someone who's new to town government.
Rookie. He's a rookie.
As far as Raynham's concerned, Tim Anasio, thank you for joining us, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
See, if Tim hits a home run, we don't say anything till he gets in the dugout. No, that's baseball. And then they all jump all over Tim. Congratulate him.
Yes.
You a ball player? Did you play ball?
I did. I
You
played.
look like a second baseman or a shortstop.
I played baseball played many sports: boxing, hockey, soccer, baseball. Yep. So yeah, I love all
Your
sports.
nose
really.
looks okay, so your boxing must have been all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Your ears aren't, right, Pat? Ears look okay to you?
Yeah.
Exactly. Are you from this area, Tim?
I'm from Massachusetts. I was actually born in Springfield, Mass, and
Okay.
raised in that area. My whole family's still there. What family has come to the United States? Originally, my family's from Portugal, so the majority, I'd say 90%.
You found a home in this area. Half our town's Portuguese. They're
Yeah.
all named Machado or Pacheco.
And that was a
Really?
compelling reason. That's what I enjoyed. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Definitely. My son lived in Springfield for a while. But then he wanted to get closer to his work.
Sure.
Moved.
Good.
Thank
Now
you,
he's
Pat.
here in Raynham.
Now he's back.
She nods. I see.
Very definitely. So, Tim, how did you happen to get involved in town of Raynham?
Well, it's a great question. I had been in Gloucester, Rhode Island for 2 years, and I've been looking to get back to Massachusetts. I originally had learned the mass planning system. I went to UMass Amherst for grad school. I got a job in Rhode Island when I got out, moved down there, and so I had learned originally the mass system, wanted to get back into Massachusetts, and I wanted to get to a
Was it all in planning, Tim?
It was, yeah. We at UMass Amherst, it was sort of the programs were merged between landscape architecture and regional planning. They had called it, so
Sure.
urban planning, city planning, and the curriculum was mixed. So all students, whether you picked landscape architecture or planning, took approximately the same amount of courses in each discipline. So that's sort of when I got into the program, I was interested in planning. I had moved from a different line of work in government. And then I wanted to get back to Massachusetts, and I live in Providence, currently live in Providence now, and when Raynham was sort of up 44, and so I applied, and I really liked it. I loved the interview. They made me feel comfortable there. Everything was great with the town. It really was, and the town's grown a lot, specifically since 2000. So, so yeah, that's what basically made me.
The apartment houses. Pat loves apartment houses. Because her school gets a chance to meet all sorts of new students.
Yeah.
Loves it.
Definitely. Now, when did you start employment in Raynham?
I started on late April, but I attended one of the meetings prior. I think April 25th was my first day, and then so I left Gloucester a week prior, and then I sort of came on board de facto, I guess you would say, and I was, I sort of full steam ahead with the meetings. I attended the meeting, and just so I could.
Did it take about an hour to get to Gloucester?
For me, from Providence,
Yeah.
it was actually a shorter commute than to Raynham. Believe it or not, yeah.
Wow.
It was about a half an hour. Yeah. Now I'm about 38 minutes on a good
What,
day.
you got a canoe?
Yeah. It was, but it wasn't that much short. It's a tough drive up.
Yeah.
That area of 44 is, it's less developed, so it was tricky. So they need resurfacing done on that road up 44 in Rhode Island. So it was a tough ride. It was a bumpy ride. Yeah.
Tim, can you explain what your job entails?
Sure. My job entails, specifically the easiest way to explain it is subdivision and site plan review. I work with the planning board in conjunction with the planning board and town personnel on policy decisions, land use controls, things of that nature, doing some research for the board, some research for the town, economic development as well as a component in planning, a more recent component in planning within the last 20 or 30 years. So basically, where does a community make their money? So it's, I've heard it explained best from, who was a planner in Cranston, Rhode Island, and he was telling me, because, it's sort of everyday change. Every day is different. That's what I like about the job. And the planner had said, I asked him, I said, how would you explain municipal planning in general, and he said, I've been married to my wife for 40 years. She still doesn't know what I do. That was his response. So yeah, it's sort of a mishmash of a lot of things, and that's what I like most about it. Everyday changes, sort of looking into a new thing usually daily, following up on stuff, and also one of my sayings is, just when you think you're done, you're not. So a lot of times these projects are permitted, the development is permitted, and then a year, two down the road, maybe even a couple months down the road, you'll be looking back into it, making sure that you basically took care of the things you were supposed to, if there's any changes or modification to those plans. So it's a continuous process, but you touch a lot of things, which is great.
Sure.
So, because I pick up a lot of information, and I'm kind of like that in general. I like to sort of, I'm curious about a lot of things, so it's good.
Now, you mentioned subdivision. What if someone has a piece of property and they decide they want to build on it? How does that come before the town?
It would depend what they wanted to build on it.
Just suppose it was just a residential home, so they have to get a building permit.
Yeah, if it's a standalone lot in itself and it's either grandfathered in, that it was basically cut out before zoning regulations or before those current dimensional or use regulations were put in place, then you can essentially pull a building permit if you're going to put a standalone structure on there. But a lot of these pieces of land are, as you had mentioned, larger pieces of land, so they might be subdividable.
Right.
But they'd have to meet the current standards that we have now, the current zoning standards. So a lot of times what'll happen is, if folks are interested in doing it, they usually stop by the building office and talk to Bob Iafredi, the zoning enforcement officer, and he'll sort of give them the regulatory framework or help them with the regulatory framework as far as what's going to be required to be able to cut it out. Then it sort of gets transferred over to us on the planning side, and then we move it in front of the board, and usually the negotiations take place from there, and sort of if any waivers have to take place, and what physical constraints might be on the property, and the applicant comes in with, proves the feasibility basically of it.
So it can be simple, or it can get to be pretty complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. A lot of layers to it involved in it, and sort of the way I see these projects too is a bit different. And sometimes it's hard to summarize them, like simplify them. A lot of times the way I simplify a project is sort of explain to someone like yourselves about the project, and then people will say, oh, well, it's sort of like this. And I'll say, yeah, I've been working on this months, and I was never able to simplify it because I think there's so many movements to the variables that sort of, I think every aspect is important. Where somebody, an outside observer, has a different vantage point, and they might think that certain elements are more important. So I think of it as a lot of these projects, I have to be big picture, and I have to be very detail-oriented too. So sometimes it can be tough to sort of simplify them, I guess. Yep.
But you would say basically the role of the town planner and the planning board is to protect the town.
Correct.
To make sure that anybody moving into town or whatever follows all the rules and regulations.
Right. There's definitely a public safety component to it, a big, and that's basically the controls that we can place on any land all stem from basically health, safety, and public wellness. Yeah, that's the simplified version of it. So,
Do you work with conservation?
yes, in conjunction.
Azu comes over and
Yep, conservation is in conjunction with the planning board. Massachusetts works a little bit different than when I was in Rhode Island. Rhode Island usually have to get the wetlands permit, let's say, or the wetland line delineated prior to moving forward in planning. I'm adjusting here as far as a lot of times it'll work in conjunction. It's not a perfect system, but a lot of times it'll work in conjunction with it. So yeah, we do work with conservation a lot, and it's actually a big part of whether or not a project is feasible has to do with conservation, the land, the elements on that land, the constraints on that land, if any. So.
is the Serpent, you're also down there?
Serpent, yep, work with Serpent. Attended a couple meetings thus far, and it's been good. I've been talking about the South Coast Rail and how it's sort of been kicking around a while, and we're looking at some municipal assistance that they can provide. I think it's 20 hours a year, I believe it is, 20 hours to the planning board and 20 hours to the select board, I believe it is, and they can sort of help us with certain projects. Like we're looking at the possibility of Route 138 had a land use study a couple years back. I think it was 2012. So it was done, and now we're looking at potentially hoping to utilize some of those hours to sort of update that study. It won't be be a broad brush update, like basically any elements.
There is a committee that's for 138 that probably you'll meet with, and they'll give you an idea of what they don't want.
Right, I'm sure.
Does the town have a lot of control over what happens, or a lot depends just on whatever state laws are? And if it's not something that's specifically against any regulations, then pretty much the property owner can do what they want.
Yeah, there's definitely development. There's definitely rights to developments, rights to land,
Sure.
rights to develop land or conserve land. But yeah, a lot of the controls that a municipality can put forth are sort of devolved down from state legislation through case law through legislation. It's sort of a spider web of how it sort of got there. But everything really can get rolled back into public safety and public health and wellness, and that's a lot of the land use controls that any municipality can put down have to be able to be justified in that manner. Yeah.
So in addition to all of the town's rules and regulations, you have to be up with all of the state regulations as well.
Yep. The basically Zoning Act in Massachusetts is, in my opinion, it's a lot of it was based off case law too. So that's something that it's forever changing as well. So things will fall precedent based on certain cases. So luckily there's a Massachusetts listserv for planners. So a lot of times if I have a complex question that's going to take me hours to research, I'll sort of put it out there and see if anybody's sort of touched this before, if anybody's sort of seen this before, and it's been actually a really useful tool in my job. Yeah, so it's forever changing. So, but it's interesting. So.
Absolutely. If you drive around town, you can see there's a lot of building going on.
Yep, there is a lot of building going on. Definitely.
We have a lot of building permits that have been pulled that are waiting for development at this point.
I believe so. Yeah, it looks the building office, I work with them a lot, and it looks like they're fairly busy. The community I came from too was similar. Usually the building side, as far as walking in, foot traffic is pretty busy. So
Are you familiar, Tim? There's a big building next to Walmart. Do you know what that's going to be? Are you familiar with that at all?
Yes, I believe that is going to be, I think it's 42,000 square feet of, I want to say mixed retail space and some office space. I believe so. That was permitted through site plan review.
Because that is right next to Walmart.
Right.
I just noticed that the other day.
Yeah, it's huge.
It is.
No. That had, I think, come through in December of 2015.
The access wouldn't be from the road that Walmart has access. It would be probably from the other road where the businesses are.
Commerce Way, I
would think
believe.
so.
Yeah, I think it's Commerce Way is the access there. Yep.
Well, they're just about maxed out on the Raynham Woods.
Yeah.
Beautiful park.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Yeah,
park.
John,
Really nice.
John
yes.
and the Buemiller boys, I believe, own most of the property that's left there. They'd be glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. That's great.
It's been in town a while as well, about Raynham Woods, correct? Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if you've heard the story, but Mr. McKinnon
It's a
played a
long
really
story.
important part in all of that because at one point, many, many years ago, that was slated to be a hazardous waste site.
They had every sort of, and previous to that, it was going to be a mall.
Jordan Marsh,
Yeah,
where Jordan Marsh was going to build there.
So it has
and-
quite a history in itself.
Right.
But right now, the developer has pulled out, I think, and they've got a couple of local people who bought up, I believe, the remaining pieces of property there. And as you see, that one I just asked you about, that's just been sold. So,
Right.
It'll be maxed. There'll come a time.
Absolutely. Now, as far as subdivisions that are on the planning board right now, the drawing board, I meant to say, what are the larger ones? I know there's one on a big division coming on Locust Street with many homes. Is that something that came before the planning board?
Yes, that would be the project name. The working name is Bassett Knoll, I believe, and that was it was permitted quite a while ago. I guess the entire project was started in the 80s, and I don't know exactly the history to it. But that was permitted in front of the planning board about a year ago, I believe. Yeah, so that's certainly something that I believe at this point, I think they just finished the sewer there, and now they're looking at putting in the improvements for the road and a lot in conjunction with running the water lines and everything like that. But that had come in front of the planning board. As far as new subdivisions that are coming forth, since I've been on board, we've worked on what's called Tallman Estates over off White Street. That's a 3-lot subdivision. One lot, the lot 2 would be about 5 acres. 1 and 3 would be about 1 acre. 1 acre each, respectively.
Is this off of White Street coming up from
South side of White Street?
104?
Yep.
Is it on the left-hand side?
Correct. If you take a left off 104 onto White Street, it's on the south side. Yep. I think it's, I would say, a couple hundred feet past Christina's Path. I believe that's the street. Christina's Path, I think it is. Yes.
I'm thinking, is the fellow that sells water, is that the fellow that, or do you know?
Oh,
There's a fellow that sells water on that White Street, and he's got like 100 acres, 80% of it
It's
swamp.
amazing. You go by an area, and you know, beforehand you just see the woods, and it doesn't look like it's that big. And then how many, when it's developed, how many homes can go in there? It's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, driving
Yeah.
by it and just looking at it from the road. Sometimes it doesn't seem that big, and then you find out it's a huge
So
development.
there is some buildable property in the town of Raynham, although
Yeah.
we may reach a point where we're built out, and that'll be the end of that.
Right. By current standards, yeah, and I think most communities would. I mean, that's almost like I guess, sort of the path that they set in place as far as zoning, to the point where if it was built out, here's how we would want to see it built
Right.
out with X amount of dimensions, or
Would you say, coming in, looking at it with fresh eyes, that Raynham has been designed or planned? You can only plan so much, but in a good way for the town.
Oh, a very good way. Yeah. And I think you have some commercial corridors. You have 138 and 44 were specifically commercial corridors. They have really good access, in my personal opinion. Even me. I'd been through Raynham before, but I haven't looked at it as
Right.
sort of a planner's eyes. But that was one of the selling points to me on the town. I says, yeah, it's got a lot of potential. You have some, some towns, I guess, in my experience, some towns wish they had good access like this. It's really good access. You have 24, 495.
Location.
Yeah, very close to the Boston area, close to Providence as well. So that's
And the old track, I don't know how many acres there are, to tell you the truth, but a lot of acres where the old Raynham dog track
Yep.
was, and that's something which they're thinking about anyway,
Yep.
the owners.
right.
They wanted the slots there, remember that, Pat?
Yes,
And the
that
state.
didn't- yeah.
And the state didn't pick us, but how they doing?
Yeah, really.
Down in Plainville, they're not doing that well. So maybe Raynham was the better location. The location in Plainville is a stone's throw from the slots in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So if you go to one, why not go to the other? And from what I hear, they better do a little something,
Right.
a little bit of homework down there, because there are people still going to Connecticut.
For the
gambling.
For gambling. Yep.
Now, if a big development comes into an abutting community, say Bridgewater or Taunton, does Raynham have any input whatsoever? What happens? Thinking, for example, still talking about a casino in East Taunton, or we just recently got a big commercial apartment development right on Raynham's border with Bridgewater. Would the town have any input in those kinds of projects?
They do, yeah, and that's
And
really,
it's important that the town should, or if possible.
Yep, that's a really great question, actually. That the town be considered an abutter. And the way that I always explain abutters is, as an abutter, a direct abutter, if you're in X amount of feet from the radius of any project, the easiest way for me to explain it is that you're presumed to have standing being within that buffer, but the onus falls on the abutter to prove that they have standing. If you're outside of that radius, you're presumed not to have standing, but at the same time, you can prove that you have standing there. Like, for instance, if you have proportionally, if you have a project that's concentrated, it might disproportionately cause traffic knots outside of the abutter's radius. So yeah, the town is notified on projects going on. Every town is actually outside of our administrative boundaries, and usually that's something I review, and then members of the planning board will review it too. And if it's something that we feel could have an impact in town, then we certainly address it, or we certainly provide comment. But since I've been here, I haven't come across that yet. So
Well, the casino in Taunton, if it does go through, that's in East Taunton. Are you familiar with that? The casino,
Yes.
Native American? And the problem with that is we are abutters, and we're probably the only one that will be impacted quite as surrounding communities. But yet I think they have to get full approval. I don't know if they have to open, but they have to get full approval anyway before we can get an impact as to whether we get a certain amount of dollars, because it's different than a state authorized casino. This is not state authorized. This is the Division of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C. That's where all the litigation is going on now.
right.
So it doesn't matter to me. I don't go there anyway. Do you go there, Pat?
No,
You don't go to the gambling? Are you a gambler?
no.
Not really.
You know, to Connecticut?
Yeah.
That's where the bus used to go. Used to go every day from the mall down to the casinos in Connecticut. Now they go Tuesday and Thursday only.
Oh,
That's all because of the reduction in
Really?
the crowd.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but, yeah, it's business. And typical of, we were out in Arizona years ago, and gee, there every other street has a casino in it, if you will.
Right.
So, I mean, they don't do any business. They choke each other out. That's why the one in Everett will be interesting to watch. That's one which I think will probably make money, because that's Boston. Boston has the traffic. Whereas around here, I don't know. Good luck. Right? That's not our problem.
That's right.
Tricia, do we worry? We don't worry about that.
No, we don't worry about that. We only worry about the things we can have something to do with.
That's right. We got
Exactly.
enough on our plate.
That's
Thank
right.
you very much.
Tim, from a planning perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the town of Raynham?
That's a great question. I think that some challenges, I think, would be any state legislation that comes forth that sort of puts a spin on what we're currently doing. That, to me, that's always a big challenge, because there's always things changing from the state level. Right now, I haven't identified anything like that. I'm
Yeah.
sort of still swallowing the elephant,
Oh,
really, per
sure.
se. But I think that's some of the things that I think disrupt the planning process in general. I mean, sometimes, I won't say it's to the null or anything like that. It's sometimes some are beneficial and sometimes some are worse. But I think any of those big changes that impact the day-to-day planning responsibilities, whether being good or bad, I think that's the biggest challenges for me, because you sort of have to adjust your game plan, to things, and you might talk yourself out of having you had one opinion, and then after something like that changes, you have a different opinion on it. So, relating to a project in particular. So,
Right. From an infrastructure perspective, we have two really good water districts that seem to, have everything managed very well, and obviously our sewer project, we're almost completely, as much as possible, sewered in the town. That project's still ongoing, and so, and our road system is pretty good, I would say, wouldn't you say, Don?
Surely, yeah.
But then, of course, with new development coming in, you have to always be concerned about what that impact will be.
correct. And then also the state having projects that either abut Raynham or within Raynham. There's a couple going on right now. Well, I think I did some research on the exact metrics, and I think going back to 2000, there's been 28 total state investment projects in roads specifically. Traffic signals, resurfacing, bridge replacements. It's been 28 total overall. I think like 13 or 14 have already been completed. Then you have the ones that the state wants to do, but they're still looking for that funding tail. Then you have the projects that the state is basically earmarked to do because they have that funding tail to it. So so there's a lot going on, and certainly things like that affect any outside investment in general.
Right.
And I'm working on a project now to sort of map those potential projects that the state is doing out. So not only can folks in town be able to access it and put a visual representation to it, but also any outside, any people from the outside of town, if outside investment, it can impact internal policy decisions. So I think it's just a good thing to sort of put a visual representation to it so that, because it sort of takes text out of it and maps it out so that people look at it and sort of go, oh, okay, how about this, you know? So.
Quite a project going on at Route 44 at the intersection with Orchard Street, with all of those, you know, extending the intersection and all of those lights. It's a little bit confusing when you come up, which
Yeah.
light is mine, kind of thing.
Now they got one, that light goes on up there, which is well done though, because the big problem was when you come off 24 to get to Orchard Street,
Right.
it's practically impossible to get across. Well, what they've solved that by putting up about 12 lights. And all of a sudden, they're stopping the traffic just before the access from 24, backing the traffic up beyond the entrance at South Street. So now it's coming right down. But they are at least getting the people from 24 over to Orchard. They're finally doing that. They do have to stop the whole United States of America. I think the whole state of Massachusetts stops, but they can get out. But that is quite a project. It's a multi-million dollar
certainly is.
project.
Yes, yes. And it's been going on for a while, but that's the way the state works sometimes.
I would say that 138 will be. Have you met with that committee yet, by the way?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
No.
That's an eye opener. That'll be an education.
Sure, sure.
That's a challenge, Don, because you've got a mix there. You have some
People still wanna
residential
keep it
properties,
residential.
and they want to, and then you have some commercial, and it's getting on a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, 138 because a lot of the citizens there opposed the Walmart, second Walmart, the one that's over on Route 138, and so then you already have Market Basket, which is a gold mine for traffic. So you got those two side by side, and then of course where they really had the problem was coming off of First Street, and wouldn't you know, that's really where all the building is going on. And you'll have to meet, we give him a golden name, John Texera.
Yes.
Meet with John Texera from the planning board, and he is in that committee on 138, and he'll be able to update you everything on what the problems are on 138. Because now you've got more places just popping up on 138. haven't you? That assisted living place came in
Yes.
next to Trukey's warehouse, just next to 495, and so it's 138 poses a problem in planning, I believe.
Right.
And, it's something which is an eye opener, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Definitely. So your office is going to be very busy going forward, I'm sure.
Sure, definitely, definitely.
If anybody has any questions or whatever, you have office right at Town Hall. People can stop by.
Correct.
Has anyone spoken to you, that North School Committee? You've met with them as far as trying to find use for a building that we'd like to see preserved rather than demolished or something
Well,
like
like
that?
the North
old
School,
right?
Tim has been at our meetings of the North School. We
Yep,
appreciate
yeah.
that. And these are things, the old building, the Gilmore Hall is, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's up at the corner where the McDonald is and the Bristol County Savings, up Route 138. And there's a traffic light there now. And it's a problem because some people want to keep going left on 138 to McDonald's, and that's illegal. It's a study.
Oh, right,
It's a
right.
study, yeah. And so there's little things that are happening. And those are the things that you don't think, and all of a sudden you realize those are the things that'll take all the time
Right.
to solve. Because, as Pat says, with residents on 138, they have a vested interest. It's their home. It's a residential home. And I'm doing now on one series, and it's starting with the Place for Steak, which was 1974. And that was a neighborhood situation, which really became very intense. So you can get into neighborhood things that really get complicated.
Right. When you go to town meeting, it's amazing. Some things that go through that you would think would generate lots of discussion, and they don't. But planning issues, they bring the
And
crowds.
neighborhood things
Right,
are
right,
not
right,
voting
right.
around.
We are just about out of time, but our guest today, Tim Inacio, our new Raynham Town Planner. Your office number, Tim, do you know that offhand?
Offhand, I don't.
Okay, but they can call Town Hall, which
It's
is
always 82427.
Right, 824-2700 is the town clerk's office and you
49 or
can
something
switch you to that, so.
Sure, my extension's
excellent.
120, so.
Okay,
if that
very
helps, yeah.
good. Thank you very much for being with us, John. We'll be here on our next
Appreciate it.
episode.
Thanks very much, Tim, for coming in.
Thank
I
you, John.
drafted
Thank you,
him
Pat.
late,
Yep.
so appreciate it.
Thank you, and all of you, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of The Good Old Days.